Let me start off by saying there are many decisions I regret. I regret that I put myself in this situation, but I cannot regret what I learned from it, and I hope someone will learn from my own mistakes. I'm not one of those overly nice women who spend most of their lives being extremely shy. I remember when I was in high school, if someone would come and say hello to me, I would tremble and blush. I had extreme social anxiety. Though people generally liked me, thought I was beautiful, and often wanted to talk to me, I tended to keep to myself. Ever since I was 11 years old, me being 25 now, I used the internet as a social outlet. I have since become more social, and not use the internet as such of a crutch as before, but even though I'm no longer so shy, I am just used to being online. And so from time to time, I still find myself making new online friends and venturing into new online communities. So I was part of this webcam community when I was roughly 22 years old. In the group, there were a lot of trolls, but seeing as trolling is very common, and I think most people assume trolls are only trolls online, and then fairly normal people in person, I grew accustomed to their ways, though I didn't partake or encourage in their ways. In fact, I would sort of act like a mother and tell them to tone it down from time to time. I was generally liked, even by people who seemed to revel in hatred. So in this group there was a guy roughly my age. His name was James. God. Just writing his name made my heart skip a beat, in the worst of ways. James was essentially the leader figure of the group. He was the creator of the room, had the power to ban, etc. He was a good-looking guy, muscular, just very easy on the eyes, which would cause women to flirt with him a lot. He was also very loud-spoken. He would often be on his cam, playing video games and randomly yelling at the game. He was an Iraq, Afghanistan war Marine vet. He loved to collect guns and knives. I found out he had been abused by his father. He told us that he suffered from PTSD. He would also say really off-the-wall things out of nowhere, like, when I was serving in the war, when I had to kill someone, I salivated. But I chalked it up to him just being a troll. From watching him randomly yell at video games, I could tell he had some problems with anger, but I thought being loud and over-emotional was all it really came to. So me being generally liked, people thinking I'm beautiful, etc, etc, James out of nowhere started to take an interest in me. I don't know if it was romantic or not. People from the community always tried to tell me that he cared for me, but that is besides the point. At the time, we were slowly developing a friendship. I had a boyfriend at the time who is now my husband, and I made it very clear at that moment that I am not available to anyone. Nothing inappropriate was ever said to me. He wasn't the type of man to call me pretty or anything. He would just be really happy when I was around and wanted to show me this or that, links, news articles, games, etc. I think he genuinely needed a friend, and considering how socially starved I was usually, I think I was desperate for a friend too. So I'm sure that on paper, as you read this, you are already counting up the red flags. To be honest, some of them were in the back of my mind too, but I really try to be all accepting and to assume to best out of people. I am or was an extreme optimist, and I believe that 99.99% of people are generally good, and that everyone has a little bit of darkness in them, and that it doesn't make them necessarily a bad person. So James gets this puppy, a wolf-husky hybrid. He seems to just adore this dog. He is a really lonely guy, and generally just looks sad or maybe even a little mad at his neutral face. Once the dog came into his life, he was all smiles, even did the baby talk thing to it, and he would cuddle the pup and spoil the pup on camera. He fed his dog top-notch food, called the dog his son, and sleep with the dog in his bed. Basically, he gave this dog the sun, the moon, and the stars. No one could doubt the love he had for this pup. So, as his dog is still a puppy, there are some rough times, as the dog is learning how to behave. Sometimes it would be pee and poop in the house. Sometimes it might chew on something it shouldn't have, dog stuff. Sometimes Shane would say with a laugh and a smile, "Oh, the puppy was misbehaving, so I punched him in the jaw." Everyone would laugh and not think a thing of it, because he lavished his dog so much with love and attention, and he was a troll, after all. So it just so happens that James lives close by to me, like maybe an hour drive away. At this time, we are really good friends, and I happen to be really good with animals myself, and James is getting more and more frustrated with his dog. He was starting to say things like, "I just don't know if he will ever learn. I can't teach him. I'm gonna have to take him to the pond." He would often ask me for advice, but according to him, he wasn't getting any results. Well, it turns out that other people in the room have visited James before in person, and well, they are still alive, so I think, why the heck not? I offered to come over and help him with his dog, and also offered to babysit his dog if he ever needs a break. So I tell my boyfriend what is up. Boyfriend doesn't seem to mind, and so off to Colombia, I go. It was my first time meeting an online friend, and I viewed it as an adventure. I get to James' house, nothing out of the ordinary. James is very polite, shows me around his place and around the town. We play with his dog, play video games. I treat him to some dinner, and then after a few hours I pack everything up. The plan was for me to babysit his dog at my place, and work on training while his dog was with me, and then bring the dog back in a few days. So I bring the pup home. Boy, James was actually sort of right. The pup is sort of out of control. He is large because of the wolf in him, but he's still very young. As soon as he enters my apartment, he immediately runs around in circles, playing, peeing while doing so. So while the pup is with me, I train him, take him to parks, socialize him with lots of people, and generally it is a good experience. I take him back to Colombia and hang out for a few hours again, and then I go back home. I did this maybe 2 or 3 times with no hiccups or cause for alarm. So our mutual online friends from Australia fly in and are staying with James. So I figured it is a good time to go out there again to meet more people. I get there and all is well. We go out to eat, socialize, nothing is amiss. We get home and James starts working on his math homework. He sucks at math. And online I would help him a lot. So I figured I can give him a hand here in person. All is well. But then he starts getting frustrated that he can't solve this problem. Out of nowhere, he takes the lead end of his pencil and presses it firmly into the muscle of my back. He didn't stab me, but it really hurt. I remember I said, "Hey, cut that out. I'm trying to help me. Don't abuse me." And I told him we ought to take a break since we were getting so frustrated. We go into his room where I, and the 2, a girl and a boy Aussies, are hanging out playing video games. We smell something awful and found out that his dog had pooped in a shoe and bag on the floor. James and the male Aussie clean it up. So us 2 women go to the living room to hang out with the dog. James comes out suddenly, grabs the puppy, and holds it up in the air and starts shaking it as the poor thing is crying. I'm shaking, trying to grab the dog from him, begging to let the poor little guy go. He then sits on the ground with the dog, squeezing and twisting his paws so that the dog cries out. He looks at me and says, "Come here. The dog was bad. He needs to be punished. It's your turn to hurt him. Do it." Of course I didn't. I think the 2 Aussies were scared of the situation because they wouldn't say anything to stop James. But when James wasn't around, the girl was saying, "Who does that to an animal?" and looked like she was going to cry. Then she tells me, the other day, he beat the dog with a rod. I left soon after, shaken, and hoping that this was all some sort of fluke. James was so nice, and he loved that dog so much, and this stuff doesn't really happen. All sorts of confused thoughts ran through my head as I tried to make sense of someone who seemed so nice, suddenly becoming so cruel. So I am home and very shaken. I am trying to make sense of all what I saw. For some reason, it was such an overload that nothing seemed to compute at all. I kept trying to tell myself maybe he really wasn't hurting him, right? Just scaring him? Which isn't much better, to be honest. I remember the time when I had the dog in my care, and even if I just hugged the dog so he couldn't run after something, he would cry bloody murder. It is a husky breed trait that makes those dogs cry bloody murder for just getting a bath. I kept trying to tell myself that things weren't as bad as I thought they were. I mean, it must have been some big joke. If he was going to do such a thing, why would he do it in a room full of people? So I continued to talk to James. I have to admit that I am wary. I am unsure how much he is hurting the dog, but one way or another, I am not liking the situation. I am someone who does not even like it if someone were to hit a dog with a newspaper. I don't support violence or intimidation for training animals whatsoever. At this point, I really should have reported him, and I can't remember why I didn't. I think part of it was the confusion. Like, he was so nice, this had to be a fluke. He just needed education about how to properly treat an animal. I think part of it was also that he boasted of being very tech-savvy and good at finding information, and I think I was afraid that if he was reported, he would know it was me, and he would try to mess with my life somehow. I remember trying to talk to James about the incident, but to be honest, I can't even remember that conversation at all. I want to say he was avoidant or dismissive, but I really can't remember what was said. I think I was in too much shock, and it may have been blocked out of my mind. I can't even remember if I told my boyfriend about it or not. I think I didn't, because I'm sure if I did, he wouldn't let me have any contact with him whatsoever. Maybe I thought I had to deal with the problem on my own, like it was something for me to solve. I really can't remember. It's kind of sad seeing all the ways my brain is trying to protect me from my thoughts. However, there are some memories that I will never forget, so here I am, debating on if I should report this or try to work it out or whatnot. For some reason or another, the prospect of me babysitting his dog comes up again. I don't even remember what prompted it. In fact, I may have been the instigator, I think, in my mind. I just had to get that dog away from him, even if it were just a little while. I honestly can't remember. What I do remember is the incident that is about to unfold. You know those horror movies where someone is about to do something stupid that ends up leading to their death? Yeah, that was me. So, while I was a complete dummy for not reporting him, and I am a complete and utterly stupid person for agreeing to come by again to pick up the dog to babysit, I was at least on my guard. I was very nervous going back, but for some reason, I just felt like I had to do it. I was hoping it was just a fluke. Even James himself would talk about how he thought cruelty towards animals was one of the worst crimes ever. Nothing made any sense. So I get to his house and I'm very sleep deprived. I think I had worked the night before and drove without sleeping first. So I was barely keeping my eyes open. James, on the other hand, was doing homework when I arrived. He had to go to the class that day, and so he said while he was at class, I could crash on his couch for a couple hours, catch some sleep, and then when he came home, we would grab a bite to eat, and then I would be on my way with a dog. It was so odd, because he was so nice again. I was starting to wonder if I overreacted and just saw and heard things that didn't actually happen. I was doubting my sanity. Well, I should have been doubting my wisdom. Then the pup poops on the floor. I remember being on edge thinking, last time this happened, but I shoved it down, really hoping and praying it was all some sort of misunderstanding. I offered to help clean up the mess. He just smiles, being super nice. Nah, it's alright. Try to get some sleep so we can hang out later, I got this. We put the dog in his kennel, in timeout. I think, wow, he must have learned a lot from how he behaved last time. I was so relieved, and everything seemed to be going well. I am resting in the room where the kennel is, and all of a sudden, James barges in. He says, I decided that I'm really mad. He opens the kennel door, and as I get up to stop him, he pushes me out the way and says, stand back, this is going to be bad. And he had almost a smile on his face. He then corners his puppy in the kennel, sitting down in front of the open door, and kicks the pup with the heel of his foot. I'm yelling, please, James, stop. And he screams, I can't stop. And he smiles and keeps doing it. Then he drags the dog out and holds him down with his knees, and punches the dog directly in the face. Then he grabs metal objects and starts hitting him in the face. I am all shriveled up in the corner, crying my eyes out and pleading for him to stop, and he just seems to excite his violence more. Finally, and probably very stupidly, I start trying to pull him off of his dog. Keep in mind, this is a muscular, military-trained man. I am 5'3" and 110 pounds. It was odd because he would turn and actually very gently push me away from him, and then turn back to his dog and continue the ruthless beating. He then grabbed a Wiimote and used a cord on it to wrap around the dog's neck and strangled him. I literally heard the dog choking and gagging. It was the worst sound I've ever heard. The dog bit him hard on the hand, and finally he stopped to run to the sink to wash his wound and try to stop the bleeding. I remember I had James' blood on my arms for some reason, and there was blood on the dog's fur. I couldn't stop crying. He kept yelling at me from the bathroom, I can't get it to stop bleeding, and saying, that is a dead dog. Before I could even think to grab my phone or belongings, I grabbed a leash and promptly ran out of the house with the dog, and just kept running. I reached the end of the house, and just hid and cried with the dog. After some amount of time, James had left his house to go to school. I grabbed my belongings, got the dog supplies, put them in my car, and sat in my car with the dog and called my boyfriend, and told him everything that happened. I was distraught and was thinking, maybe I could bring the pup home, take him away from here. When I get home, I can offer him money, anything to let me keep the dog. My boyfriend, the only one who had any sense about him, told me to absolutely not bring the dog with me. The reasoning was that it would only anger him more, and he knows things about me, and he didn't want anyone who could snap like that to turn on me, to seek any sort of revenge. Keep in mind, this guy keeps multiple weapons, and knows how to use them, and seems to delight in causing pain. I text James and beg him to let me take the dog home, and to let me pay for him, and etc., etc. He says no, he belongs to him, and he wants to put him to sleep. I put the dog and his belongings back into the house, and cry all the way home. And James texts me over and over about how he's going to put the dog to sleep. He told me that if he ever sees me again, he will bash my face in, seeing what he can do to another living being without batting an eye. Even with a smile on his face, I don't doubt it. I get home and I call the Columbia police. I tell them what I witnessed, and it was extreme animal abuse, and that the guy is a military vet with PTSD, that he collects weapons, and basically, I want to make a report, but I'm very, very afraid. The police just said, well, you either make a report or you don't, and didn't offer me any help. I talked it over and over with my family and friends, who were really looking out for my interest, and not the dogs, to be honest. And they basically told me not to go report for fear or him coming to retaliate. So here I am, full of regret and shame. I'm feeling quite the coward. James is still around, and the dog is still alive. He still puts on a big show for his love of the dog. He even made a Facebook page just for the dog, and updates it regularly. I checked it from time to time just to assure myself that the dog is still alive. I haven't spoke to James for a good 2 years, but I wouldn't doubt if he still hurts the dog. I may have been trying to stay off the radar so he'll forget me, because I've never seen someone turn from night to day like that. I've never been so afraid of someone in my life. If there is anything I can do to help the dog that wouldn't endanger me, please let me know.